Mr. President.
Senator from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this week's been interesting as I've seen some of my friends on the other side of the aisle, a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth and all the horrible things that are going to come before us. And it reminded me of a book that I used as a basis for management consulting training back in 1998. It was called Who Moved My Cheese? It's a story about two mice and two small people in a maze. The mice are named Sniff and Scurry, and the two little people are Hem and Haw. And it's only about a 100-page book. But the premise of the book is the cheese was moved in the maze, and the challenge was to figure out where the food source was. Well, Sniff and Scurry, the mice, actually did a pretty good job fairly quickly to kind of move where the cheese was and deal with the status quo. But Hem and Haw really had more challenges. And I think we've got some hemming and hawing going on here in Washington right now because they just don't understand business practices that we're trying to apply to government that have never been applied at scale before. And I decided that I would give you an idea because a lot of people think that Elon Musk is off the chain and causing all kinds of havoc. I haven't seen that yet. As a matter of fact, if time allows, I'm going to talk a little bit about the narrative this week over the payment system and all the detailed payment data that supposedly got out, which is patently untrue, contrary to what press reports have said. But I thought I'd start with the story of SpaceX. When Elon Musk decided to invest in and create SpaceX, he did something that has never been done before in this industry. He decided that instead of doing what the old players do, which is to be perfect, never launch a rocket until you're absolutely certain that that mission can be accomplished, he decided that you can learn from failure. This is actually a social media post of one of his first launches where the booster failed to come back to Earth. His immediate response, whether it was either his instincts or really good communications people, his immediate response was a social media post that said, "Great launch, unscheduled RUD, R-U-D, which is rapid unscheduled disassembly." So he was telling his shareholders and the people that have invested in SpaceX, it happened, it on its face looked like a disaster, but in fact, it was being willing to fail, provided that human life was not at risk. That being willing to fail is how you accelerate and you bypass everybody who has a partnership with the federal government. You get through all of that, and now you have the premier launch platform. While all the other competitors have been working on it for years or decades, because he understands the concept that I understand in business, where I've spent most of my life, that you learn from failure if you know how to measure it and you're responsive and resilient. Now, when I advise clients on enterprise transformation, we'd push the envelope, we'd pull back if we thought it was a market reputation risk, et cetera, business risk. So I believe that we need to do more of this, but we have to have guardrails, clearly. Now, there are just people that they just can't figure out where the cheese is. Now, if I just go back to the one area on payments, I have to admit, when I first heard about the payments information with read-only access being provided to someone who may be technically a government employee, but not a career government employee, it did give me concern. So I had my staff dig into it, and since then, the administration has put out a fact sheet that anybody who is concerned about what's happening in the payments platform should look at it. They're not looking at detailed payment data. What they're looking at is the way payments are processed to determine whether or not there's an opportunity to do it more efficiently, more cost-effectively, and leave more money in the U.S. Treasury as a result. Maybe more money that we can use to retire our debt. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. People said they're getting top secret information and confidential information they shouldn't have. I asked a specific question. I've been assured if there's any classified information, that the only ones who are going to see it are people that already have the appropriate clearances. And I've also been assured that there's no confidential information being passed. So I would defy those in the press, or maybe some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I'm all about facts here. If I've established no reputation in the U.S. Senate, it's that I am tedious and I complete my due diligence. I went to the administration, I asked these questions, and I believe we're dealing with a false narrative because people don't want to know where the cheese has been moved. They've got to get used to change. I've been in the U.S. Senate for 10 years. I am sick of saying Medicare has to get better. I am sick of saying Medicaid has to get better. I am sick of saying we are not getting people more healthy on Medicaid today. I'm sick of hearing people say that on both sides of the aisles, folks. So if we don't take some calculated risk, then we're going to be talking about the same sort of vexing issues 10 years from now. And so I would ask everybody to reject this narrative. We're going too fast, too soon, too many things on the line. And let's get to specific examples. I've used the example that's dominated the press this week to determine that most of what's being said is a red herring to take the president, and in this case, Elon Musk, off of the trail of trying to find efficiencies. You got facts to dispute that? Come to the Senate floor. I can learn from it. But stop creating a false narrative because you don't want to go through change, because you want to continue to establish and follow the status quo, which is failing the American people and failing to fulfill promises that I've heard people make for the last decade. So, Mr. President, I come here to say, I also shared a story. I had a friend of Greek ancestry call me this week and say, what's going on with Mr. Musk? Well, I will say that Mr. Musk has put out some social media posts that are incorrect. He actually is one of the reasons why we're having to complete this due diligence, because he was talking about looking at payment data versus having professionals who are, some of them career personnel, looking at source code to figure out how to make it better. So he probably needs to tighten it up. But my Greek friend told me what I thought about all this stuff. And I said, I think the president has enabled Mr. Musk and other people a lot like Icarus's father provided him with wings. They were made of wax and feathers. And if you know the mythology, the idea was for Icarus to fly and never go so low as to drown in the sea, but never go so high as to have his wings melted, his feathers float away, and ultimately drown in the sea. So to those who are looking at all of this in a way that I am, I want that sweet spot. I want those who are looking at government efficiencies to understand the rules. They need to understand confidentiality, national security, and when lives are on the line. So when we're talking about DOD, we're talking about the intel community, Foreign Service, you need adult supervision in the room to make absolutely certain we don't compromise or put those men and women in danger. But in the meantime, if we really want to force change, if we really want to fulfill the promises that we made to the American people when we took control of Washington, then we have to get people comfortable with change. And we have to start fulfilling promises, some of the big promises that for the 10 years I've been here, I've heard it every year, and we haven't made appreciable progress. So if the American people are patient, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will present facts, not innuendo, that could be politically motivated at best, or just bad information at worst, then we can get through this and we can go do right by the American people as a result. Thank you, Mr. President.